Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the warm, golden dust of 14th century Cairo. You're barefoot on smooth limestone. The call to prayer rises like smoke through the minarets, and the spice sellers are already shouting beneath awnings striped like candy. You pass a group of students huddled under a fig tree with worn QNS in their laps, debating Aristotle and the proper way to fold a turban. A donkey cart clatters by, carrying lemons the size of fists. The Nile is humming in the distance, and life feels almost too rich, too full, too alive. And you're right to feel uneasy, because a storm is quietly curling its fingers toward this city, and when it arrives, well, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in the heart of a city that believes itself to be eternal. Cairo, in the year 1346, is both impossibly old and vibrantly young. Once the jewel of the Fatimids, now under the rule of the Mamluks, those warrior slaves turned sultans. The city is a mosaic of cultures and contradictions. You can sip thick coffee while discussing algebra with a Jewish merchant, then argue politics with a Moroccan poet in the bathhouse steam. At night, the streets flicker with oil lamps and gossip. By day, Cairo is the nerve center of an empire. And make no mistake, it is rich, not just in gold or silks, though there's plenty of that. Cairo is rich in ideas, in books, in architecture, in opinions. You can walk for hours and never leave the shadow of a mosque or minaret. Al-Azhar University hums with students who memorize entire libraries. Surgeons debate how to stitch a wound. Astronomers calculate the timing of eclipses. Paper is everywhere, cheaper than in Europe, and used for everything from sacred texts to mildly passive-aggressive letters about overdue bread deliveries. And yes, even in this paradise, bureaucracy flourishes. The Nile rules all. It floods, it feeds, it ferries cargo, and it gently drowns the unwary. Its rhythms guide the farmer's prayers and the accountant's ink. Crocodiles lurk at its southern reaches, though locals say they mostly eat Greeks. And there's always someone building something. A fountain, a madrassa, a bathhouse. You count 8 domes under construction in one morning. Marble imported from Syria. Calligraphy etched into stone like poetry made permanent. There are beggars and blind men and dancers and scribes. Children dart between market stalls, chasing each other with figs and sand-covered sweets. The scent of saffron hangs thick, chased by that unmistakable tang of camel. A fortune teller in the corner mutters that the stars look strange this week, but he always says that. And yet, beneath the surface, there's a tension you can't quite name. The city is crowded, packed. In fact, some estimates place Cairo's population at over 500,000, staggering for the time. You feel it in the press of shoulders, the length of the bread lines, the rising price of black pepper. The Mamluk elite live well, but the poor are getting poorer, and not everyone is thrilled about their sultans being former military slaves with a taste for opulence and casual head-loppings. Still, for all its noise and imbalance, the city thrives. Pilgrims pass through on their way to Mecca, scholars write treatises in cramped libraries, and traders haggle until their throats are raw. There are fishmongers and chess players, poets and pigeon fanciers, bathhouse attendants with too much gossip, and old women who swear the moon used to be closer. There's even a sunscreen made from crocodile dung, which probably works about as well as you'd think. If you live here, you believe in Cairo's permanence. Sure, empires fall. Baghdad got sacked. Constantinople lost its sparkle. But this city will outlive them all. That's what the Sultan says. That's what the imams whisper in their sermons. That's what you believe as you sip date wine on a rooftop and look out across the skyline of domes and the endless, hungry desert beyond. And yet, you've heard rumors. They start as background noise. A merchant from Genoa says Venice has shut its ports. A pilgrim passing through Damascus speaks of bodies stacked outside monasteries in the west. A letter arrives from Sicily. It's smudged, frantic, and speaks of villages abandoned overnight. You overhear an imam refusing to shake hands, citing disease in the wind. Most people shrug it off. Foreigners always have plagues. That's practically their brand. Europe is damp and rat-infested, you say with a smile, as you walk past your own neighborhood's rats, casually chewing through sacks of wheat. But a few people stop smiling. A few people start watching the caravan routes more carefully. They note how many travelers wear gloves. They wonder why Alexandria's port is quieter than usual. Historians still argue whether Cairo truly knew what was coming, or whether the signs were just too scattered, too strange, too far away. Some say the city's scholars were already preparing for divine punishment. Others say no one believed the rumors until it was too late. A few whisper that the stars themselves flickered out of rhythm before the plague arrived. What we do know is this. In 1347, the Black Death had begun its slow, relentless march toward Cairo, and the city, for all its greatness, was not ready. But then again, how could it be? You sip from a copper cup, wipe your hands on perfumed cloth, and try to forget the merchant story about the rats in Messina. You go to prayer, you light incense, you laugh at the bathhouse jokes and wonder what the stars will say tomorrow night. The air smells faintly different today. You think it's just the wind. You wake to heat, dry, clinging heat that even the morning breeze can't lift. The city hasn't cooled properly overnight, and the stones beneath your feet seem to whisper warnings as you step into the street. There's the familiar clang of a distant blacksmith, the sharp call of a rooster who clearly takes his job too seriously, and someone yelling about dates being too expensive again. But something else floats in the air today. Rumors. They cling to Cairo's walls like shadows, growing longer and harder to ignore. A letter read in the shade of a mosque. A merchant whispering under his breath in the back of the bathhouse. The priest's eyes darting as he mutters his Friday sermon. You're hearing about whole towns, they say, vanishing, not in war, not by sword, but by breath. Europe is burning, not with fire, but with something worse. A black breath, some say, that spills from the mouths of the dying and curls into the lungs of the healthy. It doesn't care if you're a prince or a pig-header. If it finds you, it clings, and it doesn't let go. At first, it sounds distant, a fantasy cooked up by travelers trying to sell garlic or superstitions. But then you hear the names. Messina, Genoa, Marseille, all ports you've dealt with. Places that send ships filled with wool, scrolls, and, until now, people. The stories say those same ports are now silent, or screaming. You hear of priests dying mid-sermon, sailors bleeding from their eyes, fields left to rot, cats burned in the street, and most hauntingly, bells that toll constantly, because no one has time to stop ringing them between funerals. A Mamluk officer scoffs at the idea. If death wants to cross the sea, he laughs. Let him pay the port tax. You chuckle, but the laugh dies in your throat when you see how tightly he grips his sword. Historians still argue whether Cairo received any official warnings from Europe or Byzantium. Some believe messengers were sent and ignored. Others claim they never made it past Alexandria, too sick or too frightened to continue. But what no one disputes is that by late 1347, something was crawling toward Egypt. And it wasn't walking, it was sailing. Ships that left Constantinople on roads under full sail were now limping into Alexandria, their sails slack, their decks strangely silent. Dockworkers approached them with caution. Sometimes, they found sailors still alive, barely, rambling, feverish, clutching blackened lumps under their arms and bleeding from their gums. More often, they found only the rats. The rats, of course, didn't talk, but they didn't need to. They scurried ashore, flea-laden, hungry, and quick. In the narrow alleys of Alexandria, they found a welcome feast: scraps, spilled grain, sleeping children. In hindsight, the dock should have been closed. But hindsight is not a luxury afforded to cities in motion. And Cairo kept moving. At first, it's hard to believe in invisible death when your world is so visible, so physical. You see the market every day. You smell the spices, hear the donkeys braying, feel the press of shoulders in the bathhouse. Death is a blade or a snake bite, not a cough or a fever, not something that floats unseen on the breath of a stranger. You tell yourself this, over and over, but the stories keep coming. A caravan arrives from the Levant, and its camels are thinner than usual. Their handler, missing. The survivors say they left him outside Gaza, his skin hot as an oven, delirious, asking for his mother. He was 40. Then come the tales of entire oases gone quiet. Small desert villages where not even the goats bleat anymore. One traveler says he passed 3 separate caravans, all halted, turned back by corpses in the road. You hear whispers of the symptoms now. The black swellings, the foul breath, the fever that boils the mind. Some say it's divine punishment. Others say it's poison in the air. A few mutter that the stars are out of alignment, that Saturn has moved into a house it shouldn't have. And one man, half mad, claims he saw a city in Europe burn every cat it had. Which, you admit, sounds more like a tragic fairy tale than epidemiology. But still, the Sultan's court in Cairo finally takes notice. Advisors debate what to do, whether to quarantine Alexandria, whether to stop the flow of goods from the coast. But commerce is the city's lifeblood. Alexandria's port is too valuable. Closing it will be like holding your breath and hoping not to die. So instead, they pray. A public fast is declared. The Sultan himself reportedly gives alms. Scholars argue about the nature of plagues. Some believe it's a test of faith. Others say it's a punishment for the corruption of the elite, which is a brave thing to say in a city where criticizing the elite gets you either ignored or beheaded, depending on the weather. And then there's you, just a person, caught between incense and infection. You walk the same streets, but now you're watching. Who's coughing? Who's missing? Who has a certain grayness to their face that you swear wasn't there yesterday? You buy dried apricots from a vendor who won't meet your eyes. You walk past a school where only half the students showed up. You wake one morning to find your neighbor's home empty, the door swinging gently in the breeze. No note, no explanation, just silence. It hasn't reached Cairo yet. Not quite, but you can feel it pressing on the edges of the city like a storm cloud bloating on the horizon. You keep telling yourself it's just stories, just the wind, just gossip. And yet, as you sit beneath the palm trees at dusk, watching the sun die over the Nile, you realize something unsettling. You're starting to believe the stories, because they are starting to sound like Cairo. You start seeing them before you hear about them. The camels, dozens of them, dragging their feet more than usual, eyes dull, handlers unusually quiet. You're used to caravans. It's how Cairo breathes. Trade is your city's circulatory system. But this one, it smells wrong. Not just sweat and beasts and salted fish, but something older. Something that makes your nostrils twitch with the instinct of a wild animal sensing a bad moon. The caravan from Alexandria should have arrived days ago. It rolls in under the cover of dusk, avoiding the usual fanfare. No musicians greet it. No children run to beg sweets from the traders. There's just silence. That and the low groan of a sick man trying not to be noticed. Word spreads quickly. Someone collapsed in the spice quarter. A second man vomited blood in the bathhouse. A woman's armpits are blackened and swollen. No, worse than that. They've split. No one uses the word plague out loud. Not yet. But you feel it in the way people step back from conversations, in the sudden popularity of clove necklaces, and in how the market stalls start spacing themselves wider, as if the goods themselves are anxious. One of the camel drivers dies outside the city gate, collapses face down in the sand, never makes it to the prayer rug he kept tied to his pack. His comrades burn his body on the outskirts, a practice most imams would consider sacrilege. But the times are beginning to override the rules. Historians still argue whether that particular caravan was the one that officially brought the Black Death to Cairo. The disease likely slipped in through multiple veins: ships, traders, pilgrims. But that caravan is remembered, maybe because it arrived on a day so hot the air shimmered like oil. Or maybe because the driver who died had been seen drinking from the mosque's communal basin the day before. You've seen the basin. You've drunk from it. Suddenly your throat feels dry. A physician from Alexandria appears at the city's edge, emaciated, sunburned, eyes red like a man who hasn't slept in days. He begs for audience with the Sultan's officials. He speaks of mass graves, of streets too quiet, of rats that seem to breed faster in plague air. He begs them to shut the gates, to halt the flow of trade, to burn the clothing of the dead. Instead, he is politely thanked, given a lukewarm meal, and sent to bathe. A day later, he dies in the bathhouse. And that's when things change. You feel the pulse of the city shift. Slowly, reluctantly, but undeniably. The prayers grow louder, the streets thinner. Some people leave. Of course, wealthy merchants vanish into desert estates or summer homes in Giza. But most stay. Cairo is home. Cairo is Cairo. You don't abandon it over a cough. You run errands as usual, but you start wearing a scarf over your face. You tell yourself it's for the sun. You wash your hands more, douse them in rose water, sniff herbs on your walk home. Everyone's suddenly an expert in prevention. Onionitas swear they are immune. One man walks around with a small glass dome over his head, looking like a mildly cursed lantern. A new cottage industry pops up, talismans against the plague. You pass a boy selling scraps of paper with prayers hastily inked in crooked lines. One woman swears by crushed emerald powder. Too bad it costs more than a cow. Others say you mustn't bathe too often. Still others say you must bathe more. Historians, too, still argue about the moment the plague truly entered Cairo. Was it this week? The next? Did it trickle in? Or did it flood? The records, already patchy, grow worse under stress. Scribes fall ill. Pages are left unfinished. What we know is pieced together from contradictions, personal letters, and the dark poetry of survivors. And yet, you keep living. That's the strange part. Even as the fear grows, life goes on. The call to prayer still echoes. The baker still opens shop. Children still chase dogs through the alleys. You watch it all with a strange detachment, as if the city is performing a play and you're no longer sure if you're in the audience or the cast. Then you hear it. The first confirmed death inside Cairo city walls. A washerwoman, young, laughed too loudly, they say. Worked near the river. She collapsed during mid-morning prayer. Clutching has sighed, skin darkening fast. Her family is gone within 2 days. The courtyard where she lived is sealed. And just like that, everything accelerates. You begin to mark time by symptoms. A fever on Monday, swelling by Wednesday, death before the next call to prayer. The disease moves fast. Faster than gossip, almost. You pass a man you know, barely, on the street. and 2 days later someone's sweeping his doorstep in silence. The bathhouse is empty. The schools begin to close. The market stalls thin to skeletons of what they once were. The sound of laughter grows rare. You spot a cat curled up in the shade. It opens one eye at you, lazily, as if to say, "I told you so." Cats, after all, have long memories. The city is still in denial, but its body is beginning to sweat. More caravans arrive. Some are turned away. Some sneak through, but it's already too late. The fleas have found their new home. And Cairo, with its dense neighborhoods, its shared water sources, its community-centered living, is perfect. You sleep more restlessly now. You hear coughing through walls. You smell strange things on the wind. And every morning, you check your own armpits, just in case. This is how the plague enters your life. Not as a scream, but as a cough in the distance. A silence where sound used to be. A man who doesn't wave back. The road from Alexandria is still open, but the path ahead of you is changing. And the city, though it doesn't know it yet, is already sick. It starts with a smell. Not the familiar ones. Roasting meat, sweat-drenched linen, the sweet rot of overripe dates. This one is heavier, faintly metallic, slightly sour, and unmistakably wrong. You notice it wafting from the alleys near the Spice Quarter, lingering around doorways where the curtains no longer stay. You don't mention it to anyone, but the moment you notice it, you start noticing other things, too. Like the silence. Cairo has always been loud, even at night. There's the sound of donkeys braying, students arguing theology over tea, neighbors haggling over who stole whose chicken. But lately, it's too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, nervous quiet, the kind that creeps up on you like a thief, then sits beside you and says nothing. You wander your usual route, the baker's stall, the old man who sells papyrus charms, the well near the fountain with the gossiping widows. But today, the baker's door is shut. The old man is gone. The well is dry, or at least no one dares approach it. Something has arrived. Historians often describe the plague's onset in cities like Cairo as sudden. But you know better. It's not sudden. It's slow at first, like watching a shadow grow. You see it in the empty sandals outside homes that used to echo with noise. You see it in the way strangers avoid eye contact, as if looking too long might spread infection. You see it in your own reflection, noticing that you now walk faster, keep to the edge of walls, hold your breath passing doorways. The mosques are still full, but different. The usual chatter before prayer is gone. People kneel in hurried reverence, eyes darting. The imam's voice shakes when he calls for patience. No one hugs. No one lingers. Some bring their own mats, eyes narrowed at communal surfaces. You hear about mass prayers being scheduled, large crowds gathering to beg for divine mercy. You don't go, not because you don't believe in prayer, but because you've heard stories from Alexandria about mass gatherings becoming mass funerals. At the same time, others turn toward mysticism. The Sufis host quiet, private gatherings, chanting dhikr into the night, reciting sacred names until their voices crack. People begin wearing amulets again. One friend insists burning oud wood will smoke out the sickness. Another drinks vinegar every morning while standing on one foot, which honestly seems like a lot. But then again, you've started sleeping with an onion under your bed. Just in case. A few brave scholars attempt to organize a response. Some blame bad air or corrupted wind. Others say it's the alignment of planets, Mars rising in Scorpio or Saturn being in retrograde. There's talk of blocking wells, sealing off houses, fumigating with sandalwood and myrrh. A doctor you once trusted says to kill all cats. Another says to feed them. You decide to just leave them alone and let them judge everyone in peace. Historians still debate which theories held sway in Cairo. Was the city more inclined toward spiritual explanations or medical ones? Was it denial or helplessness that kept policy frozen? The answer, you think, is yes. It was all of it, and none of it helped. The Sultan holds a council. There's talk of quarantining entire districts. But who would enforce it? The soldiers are sick too, or scared, or both. Bureaucrats stop showing up, not because they are dead, yet, but because there's nothing left to calculate. You see the shift in small things. A woman once known for her velvet shoes now walks barefoot through the dust. A merchant who prided himself on neatness now lets his beard grow wild, muttering prayers under his breath. The man who sold your family oil for years no longer opens his shutters. Someone nails a black cloth to his door. Then the whispers begin. Your neighbor's daughter has the signs, swelling under the arms. A heat so fierce she shivers in sweat. Her father insists it's just a summer fever, but no one comes to visit. Not even her cousins. You hear a crash one morning. He's broken a jar while praying too fast. He doesn't sweep it up. 3 days later, the door is sealed with wax. This is how you know it's real. The authorities begin marking homes with charcoal symbols. The sick are told to remain inside. Families are forbidden to bury their dead outside the appointed hours. But the rules crumble as quickly as they are written. Bodies pile too fast. The gravediggers can't keep up. And then someone in your own building begins coughing. You recognize the rhythm instantly. 3 shallow inhales. 1 long exhale. A pause. Then again. You sit still. You count the seconds. You pretend you didn't hear it. The next day, their door is silent. There's no announcement. No procession. Just the quiet arrival of a man in faded robes, a wooden mask covering his face. He carries a small jar of lime, a length of cloth, and a look that says he no longer prays for the people he visits. That night, you don't sleep. The fan squeaks. The wind rattles your shutters. You feel the weight of something invisible pressing down on your chest. Not illness, not yet, but dread. In the morning, the sun is too bright. The streets shimmer with heat, and the mosque bells ring a little too long. You meet eyes with a stranger passing by. Neither of you speaks, but you both know. The plague has arrived. The plague doesn't knock. It seeps. It slides in through the joints of the city, through cracks in the market stalls, whispers in the bathhouse steam, gaps beneath heavy doors. You don't hear its footsteps, only its echoes. First a cough, then a gap in the prayer row, a closed window, a sealed courtyard, and yet, life tries to continue. You pass a physician standing in the middle of the street, arms crossed over his robe like he's about to either solve everything or burst into flames. He wears cloves strung around his neck and mutters about balancing the humus. Behind him, a man fans smoke toward his home, believing sandalwood can ward off death if the scent is dense enough. Honestly, the street smells like a cursed perfume shop, but you don't say anything. You've started chewing cardamom nonstop yourself. Cairo's doctors are working overtime, if you can call what they're doing working. One recommends wrapping yourself in cold sheets soaked with vinegar. Another says to boil onions, mix with goat's milk, and apply directly to the chest. Some believe in bloodletting. Release the bad blood. Release the disease. Others say no. Don't open the body. That's how the spirits get in. A few do something called cupping, which involves heated glass jars, a lot of suction, and what might be wishful thinking. You try to stay informed. You really do. But the contradictions pile up faster than the sickness. Historians still argue whether Cairo's medical community ever coordinated a response, or whether it fractured into chaos immediately. The problem wasn't a lack of knowledge. Cairo had hospitals, after all, bimaristans, built with marble halls, rosewater fountains, and full libraries of medical texts. But a beautiful hospital is no match for a disease that kills within days and spreads like rumor. You hear about one hospital where the staff simply stopped showing up. Not because they died, but because the sick started dying too fast to help. So the physicians just left. One is rumored to have moved into the hills, claiming that only altitude could protect him. You don't know if he's right, but you catch yourself eyeing the horizon a little more often. Some doctors stick around, brave ones, or desperate ones. They go door to door, clutching their kits of herbs and heated metal tools. But even they start to flinch when symptoms appear. You once saw a physician calmly lance a man's abscess with surgical precision. Now, you see that same physician openly gagging in the street after a house call. They try. They do. You overhear heated debates in tea houses. Is the disease airborne? Is it divine? Is it a punishment for pride? Or for neglecting the poor? Or for building fountains instead of feeding orphans? Everyone has an opinion. No one has a cure. Meanwhile, the wealthy commission private healers, men with long beards and complicated diagrams. These specialists promise protection spells, concoctions made from imported moss, or prayers only whispered in dark corners. They make a fortune, and still their clients die. Then come the astrologers. They set up tables in the empty squares, pointing at the sky with fevered certainty. One claims that Jupiter's movement into Cancer has opened a channel of pestilence. Another says the moon is offended. Someone else insists that Saturn is in a mood and must be bribed with pearls. It would be funnier if people weren't dying between predictions. But you're not immune to desperation, either. You start carrying a sachet of dried lavender. You hang garlic above your doorway. A friend swears by bathing in goat urine at sunrise. You smile politely and avoid their home forever. And still, the plague comes. The symptoms grow more familiar now. The high fever, the swellings, underarms, behind knees, along the groin. Purple, then black. Sometimes they burst. Sometimes they don't. Always painful. Always fast. You hear of new cases every day. You begin keeping track. You stop keeping track. You start again. And the smell. Dear God, the smell. It lingers in stairwells, in clothing, in your dreams. It's sweet and sharp and wrong. No matter how much rose water you sprinkle, it waits for you in the corners. The city adjusts in strange ways. People stop bathing. Water opens the pores, they say, and the plague crawls in. Bathhouses close. Perfume sellers pivot to selling protective oils. One man starts selling talismans shaped like lungs. They don't work, but they are surprisingly stylish. The Sultan's court is silent. You don't see his guards anymore. Rumor has it several of his advisors fell ill. One scribe says the royal astrologer locked himself in a tower and won't come out until Mars behaves. Religious leaders start issuing statements. Some call for calm. Some blame sinners. Others organize prayer parades, which seem like a great way to spread a respiratory illness. But faith is powerful, and in times like this, people need something, anything, to believe in. So they chant. They burn incense. They gather in small groups and whisper God's names until their voices crack. You do, too. One night, you sit on your roof, watching the moon rise over a city that looks the same but feels utterly foreign. The streets below are mostly empty, save for a few stray dogs and a man in white robes, sweeping something. The mosque minarets glow faintly in the distance. Someone is singing, a lullaby, or maybe a prayer. You can't tell. You clutch your knees to your chest. You wonder if you'll wake up coughing tomorrow. You wonder if you'll wake up at all. And somewhere below, another door slams shut. It happens slowly, then all at once. The market forgets how to speak. You're used to noise. The market used to be a living thing. Shouting, laughter, That sharp crack of a copper pan against wood as someone pretended to get a better deal than they had. You knew which vendors would argue just to be heard, and which ones would quietly overcharge you with a smile. But now, you step into the souk and it feels like entering a mosque at midnight. Quiet, reverent, eerie. The air is heavier, even without the crowds. Some stalls are shuttered completely. Others are manned by wide-eyed apprentices who can barely keep their turbans on straight. A few merchants wear scarves over their mouths, as if the cloth will keep death out. You do, too. Everyone pretends it's about the dust. You pass a spice cellar with only 2 jars open, cinnamon and cloves, both said to ward off illness. You ask about the saffron he used to brag about. He tells you it's been 3 weeks since his suppliers sent anything from the ports. Alexandria isn't closed officially, but it may as well be. No one wants to touch cargo anymore, let alone unload it, and no one wants coins back. Merchants now push trays out with tongs, and you're expected to place your money in a small brass bowl, not directly in their hands. One man refuses to touch silver at all, says metal holds sickness. You can't tell if that's science or superstition, but you find yourself using your sleeve when handling coins, just in case. A carpet dealer who once boasted of Persian imports now sells palm mats. He hasn't received new stock in weeks. He doesn't bother explaining anymore, just gestures at his faded wares and shrugs. Then there's the fish seller. His stall used to be a chaotic symphony, slippery scales, shouting over prices, eels trying to make last-minute escape attempts. Today, he's gone. The fish are gone, and the stall smells wrong. Not fish wrong, not salt wrong. Wrong in a way that sticks to your ribs. You hear someone say he died 2 days ago. His sons sealed the stall themselves. You keep walking. Historians still discuss how Cairo's trade network began to unravel, not in one dramatic collapse, but through daily withdrawals. Trade slowed, then stopped. Prices spiked. Salt, honey, and soap became luxuries. Even water sellers grew hesitant. Who knew what floated in the buckets now? The silk seller who always used to flirt with you has gone silent. Not out of illness, out of fear. You make a joke to ease the tension. Something about how you'll still buy silk for your burial robe. She doesn't laugh. She just ties your package and looks away. And there's still bread. Sort of. The baker's line is longer now, but quieter. People no longer jostle or argue. They wait, eyes down. The loaves are smaller, too. Less flour, less yeast, more sawdust if the rumors are true. You hear that one bakery was burned down after someone claimed the owner was baking death into the dough. Probably nonsense. Still, you don't go to that bakery anymore. One vendor sells garlic, onions, and desperation. He's developed a theory. If you eat garlic at every meal, death will pass you by. You buy a bundle. You hate garlic. But what if is right? Everywhere you go, someone is missing. A stall that used to smell like lemon oil is abandoned. A jewelry seller's trays sit untouched under a thin layer of dust. You see the same black-robed man walk by twice. Once carrying a package, once carrying nothing. You don't ask. And still, people shop. Because they must. Mothers buy dates with trembling hands. Fathers carry sacks of rice on shoulders that sag. Children trail behind, trying not to touch anything, staring wide-eyed at the stray cats who now rule the alleyways like tiny, indifferent gods. You stop by a bookseller's stand, surprised to see him still open. He's selling prayer scrolls now. Fewer books, more hope. You ask if he still has that copy of the Book of Healing by Avicenna. He nods but warns you it's been touched recently. You pause, then you buy it anyway. Maybe it will help, maybe it won't. But holding something familiar feels like armor. The sounds that do remain are strange. A cough from a shadowed doorway. The wail of a flute played alone. A merchant shouting prices that no one listens to. A beggar whose voice is hoarse from pleading into silence. Once, you would have found comfort in the market. The chaos, the smells, the ridiculous drama of pricing pomegranates. Now, it feels like a ghost of itself, hollow and echoing. You see a woman drop a figure. She doesn't pick it up. Another man sneezes, and everyone within 10 steps takes a breath and walks faster. No one argues anymore. No one barters. Everyone pays whatever is asked. It's like the fear of death has inflated every price and deflated every resistance. Even the thieves have gotten quiet. You used to watch street urchins with admiration as they nicked flatbreads and ran laughing. Now, they don't run. They don't laugh. They just take, slow and cautious, as if daring anyone to stop them, and no one does. You finally leave the market with half of what you came for. You feel both relieved and guilty, like surviving the day cost someone else theirs. On the way home, you pass a musician tuning a rebab alone. He isn't playing, just plucking at strings like he's trying to remember the sound of normal. You offer a coin. He doesn't take it. He just nods and plucks, and somewhere nearby, a woman screams, but only once. Faith doesn't disappear in times like this. It mutates. You wake before the call to prayer now, not out of piety, but from the same jolt of fear that rattles in your chest most mornings. You listen, for coughing, for footsteps, for silence. Each is its own kind of omen. The mosque still open. The imams still lead prayers. But something in their voices has shifted. The confidence is softer now. The phrases drawn longer, like they are speaking into a void they can't quite fill. And people come, in droves. They come wrapped in shawls and panic, shoulders bowed not just in worship but in a shared need to do something. Anything. They gather under wide skies and mutter verses you haven't heard since childhood. You join them one day, not because you believe it will stop the sickness, but because you can't stand being alone anymore. The imam leads a du'a al-Qanat, voice trembling with every syllable. He pleads for mercy, for protection, for time. His words mix with weeping, with whispers, with the soft, dry cough of someone standing too close. No one shushes him. You all just shift slightly away. You notice something strange. A woman nearby holding her hands up to the sky, palms scarred with ink. She's written prayers on them. You don't know if it's superstition or brilliance, but it feels like both. Elsewhere in the city, mystics are gaining ground. The Sufis, once dismissed as dreamy dancers and overly poetic philosophers, are now in demand. People come to them not just for healing, but for meaning. Because what else can you ask for when the world refuses to explain itself? Historians still debate whether this moment in Cairo marked a religious reawakening or collapse in faith. Some records show an explosion of theological writing, treatises on divine wrath, essays on death and afterlife. Others suggest that people began to lose trust in religious authorities altogether, seeing too many holy men fall ill, too many prayers go unanswered. The city is splitting. Some people double down, fasting, praying 5 times a day, giving everything they own to the poor in the hope of mercy. One man you know shaved his head, put on a plain robe, and walked barefoot from mosque to mosque, repeating only one line: "Forgive us, forgive us, forgive us." By the 3rd day, no one stopped him. He became part of the landscape, like a human bell tolling his own repentance. Others turn bitter. A woman spits at a cleric who tells her to be patient. "My children were patient," she hisses. "They died waiting for God to notice." You can't blame her. Religious processions become more common. Crowds of people, chanting prayers, walking through the streets with incense and banners. You hear them long before you see them, like waves breaking in the distance. Some wear sackcloth, others wear white, as if preparing for their own burial. Occasionally, someone collapses mid-procession. The group pauses, someone says a prayer, and then they move on. No one touches the body. You begin to avoid certain corners of the city, not because of plague, but because of what it's doing to people's minds. A preacher near Bab al-Futu screams that the plague is punishment for letting women read. Another near the citadel insists it's the city's tolerance of Christian merchants. And yet, when one of those same merchants dies, it's his Muslim neighbors who bury him. Because people are still people, and faith, for all its fracturing, still connects you to them. You see it in the old man who lights a candle every night for strangers, in the woman who leaves dates outside her door, for the dead to find on their way, in the child who recites Qur'an to an alleyway, believing the words will wrap the street in armor. And maybe they do. You find yourself reaching for ritual more than ever. You wash your hands with intention. You recite small prayers while boiling lentils. You whisper blessings to the air before you sleep, just in case someone is listening. Maybe it's superstition. Maybe it's survival. Maybe it's both. The mosques remain open, but quieter. Fewer people. More space between them. You notice how some no longer bow fully, too weak, or too afraid to touch the floor. One imam preaches while wrapped in cloth soaked in vinegar. Another stands behind a curtain, his voice echoing from a hidden corner like a ghost leading prayer. Even Friday prayers shrink. There are weeks when no one comes forward to lead. So someone steps up. Always someone. Because if no one speaks the words, the silence becomes too loud. You hear tales of a young boy who memorized the entire Qur'an and now leads prayer for a courtyard of orphans. They follow his every word like his maid of light. You also hear of a group of scholars who sealed themselves in a madrassa, writing night and day, trying to interpret signs, dreams, the flight paths of birds, anything that might explain what's happening. No one has found the answer yet, but they keep looking, and so do you. You don't know if God is angry, or asleep, or just quiet, but you talk to him anyway. In the stillness before dawn, in the thunder of a neighbor's sobs, in the rustle of palm trees that somehow keep growing through all of this. You talk, and sometimes it feels like something is listening, even if it's only your own heart, echoing back. Bureaucracy isn't designed for death, at least, not at this scale. You start noticing how official things begin to fray. First, it's the little stuff, tax collectors not showing up, guards disappearing from street corners, notices posted without stamps or seals. Then it's the big stuff, no one at the Qadi's office to sign burial permits, no one answering petitions, no one really in charge. The state, as you once knew it, is unraveling one ink-stained papyrus at a time. In theory, Cairo is ruled by the Mamluks, an elite military caste who once ruled with such rigid efficiency you could be arrested for selling underweight dates. But the Black Death has no respect for military titles or palace walls. The Mamluk bureaucracy begins to fall the way trees do in a storm, one crashing after the next, leaving gaps in the canopy where governance used to be. You hear that a high-ranking vizier died mid-meeting, that 2 record keepers at the citadel were buried before sunset, that a scribe went blind from fever, then disappeared. No one fills their roles. Paperwork piles up. Ledgers remain half-written, ink drying into crooked silence. Historians still argue about the true scope of governmental collapse in Cairo. Did the bureaucracy simply stall temporarily, or did it crumble outright? Some records suggest a total breakdown of civic management for months. Others insist that administrative skeletons remained. Thin, yes, but still rattling around. What you know is this. When your cousin tries to report a death in his household, there's no one to take the report. No form to fill. No official to notify. Just a door with a broken latch and a sign that says, gone to prayer, which you doubt. With the scribes gone and the clocks dying, numbers become guesses. No one knows how many are sick, how many are dead. Some say 10,000, some say 100,000, some stop counting altogether. The walks, the charitable endowments that once fed the poor, maintained schools, paid for hospital beds, begin to run dry. Their donors are dead. Their managers, too. The people who handled the accounting either fled or fell. The almshouses closed their doors. The food lines shorten not because there's more food, but because fewer people remain to queue. And the records of death, they become rumors. You hear from a friend that the gravediggers have given up on paperwork, that they bury 10, 20, 30 a day, and no longer keep names. That shrouds have run out, and now bodies are wrapped in whatever cloth is available. Curtains, rugs, even prayer mats. One of the tax offices catches fire. No one puts it out. Someone else moves in the next day and sells vinegar from a charred crate. The bureaucracy tries to adapt in its own sluggish way. Emergency scribes are appointed. They wear gloves, carry ink pots attached to their belts, and write from 6 feet away. But they can't keep up. Paper disappears. Wax seals melt in the sun. The clocks start improvising symbols for entire sentences, shortcuts in an age of too much death and too little time. You overhear a conversation between two exhausted officials arguing over which neighborhood to seal off next. Seal them all, one mutters. Let God sort the ledgers. It's meant as a joke. No one laughs. At the city gates, guards are still posted, but their faces are gaunt, their armor half-polished. Some now wear amulets over their uniforms. One has a tiny cloth bag pinned to his sleeve, rumored to contain verses and crushed mint. He waves travelers through with barely a glance. There's talk of curfews, of rationing, of mass graves, but talk is all it is. By the time orders reach one end of the city, the other end has already changed. New deaths, new closures, new fires. The city is not lawless. Not exactly. It's just tired. Even the taxmen give up, which, for a moment, feels liberating. You laugh with a friend about not having to bribe the grain counter this month. But then you realize, without tax collectors, the mills slow down. The boats from upriver stop delivering. The price of lentils triples. And suddenly, you're bartering with buttons and prayers. The Sultan's court grows quieter. Fewer processions. No more trumpet fanfare at noon. The palace gates remain closed. You hear that the Sultan has retreated to a private estate. Some say he's meditating. Others say he's sick. One guard, drunk on bad wine, says he fled the city dressed as a merchant and hasn't been seen since. You're not sure what to believe anymore, but you do believe this. The people are filling the void. Volunteers begin organizing small burial teams. Families post notes outside their doors, marking how many inside are ill, how many need food. A neighbor starts collecting coins in a broken clay jar to distribute among widows. The butcher down the street sets up a soup station, not for profit, just because no one else will. And still, the city shrinks. One morning, you go to pay respects at a distant relative's home and find the entire district roped off. A scrap of cloth reads, simply, closed by order of the dead. No signature, no stamp, no scribe, just the truth. You walk home under a sky that feels too bright for so much grief. A child runs past you, barefoot and laughing, clutching a stick like it's a sword. He doesn't know yet that everything he's fighting is invisible. You wish you could tell him that the grown-ups are still in charge, but that would be a lie. So instead, you watch the wind scatter ash into the sky, and try not to think about how many forms were never filled, how many names were never written, how many endings came without anyone left to write them down. You didn't think the desert could feel so crowded. At first, It was just the rumors. A merchant's son heading out to a relative's estate beyond the dunes. A scholar retreating to a quiet village with a stack of books and a hopeful flask of vinegar. A noble family vanishing overnight. Their servants left behind to burn incense at the gate like smoke could erase absence. But now the roads out of Cairo hum with movement. Wagons heavy with rugs and chickens and crying babies. Donkeys pulling carts loaded with everything from heirlooms to garlic. People clinging to bundles of clothing like the thread itself might protect them. You see it for yourself as you walk toward the western edge of the city one afternoon. The gate crowded not with soldiers, but with people trying to disappear. The elite flee first, naturally. Cairo's nobles, flush with gold and gilt, pack up their families and ride off toward country villas like the plague respect property lines. They speak of quarantine and fresh air, but you know what this is. It's retreat. It's abandonment. You spot one high-ranking emir boarding a boat meant for the pilgrimage to Mecca. Is not going on Hajj. Not in this season. But the desert is safer than this city. And God, you suppose, will understand. Others aren't so dignified. There's a woman who tries to board a grain cart with nothing but a kitten and a sack of lentils. The driver pushes her off. She screams. The kitten doesn't. The city tries, briefly, to stop the exodus. Guards check papers, issue orders, attempt to limit how many people can leave. But then the guards start disappearing, too. Some get sick. Some just slip away in the night. You can hardly blame them. If the plague doesn't respect titles, why should anyone else? Historians still debate whether the desert flight helped or harmed the greater region. Did these caravans of frightened carriers spread the plague further? Did they carry disease to villages that would have otherwise been spared? Or did some truly manage to outrun it? All you know is that fear moves faster than fever. You watch neighbors leave, one by one. The man who used to bring you fresh mint for your tea, gone. The widow who always borrowed your mortar and pestle, gone. Even the loud boy who sold you questionable cheese with too much confidence, gone. Some leave quietly, like a breath held too long. Others make a show of it. Pomp, processions, hired musicians playing defiant songs that fade by the time they reach the outskirts, as if rhythm could stop infection. And yet, you stay. You're not sure why. Maybe because your mother is too weak to travel. Maybe because you can't afford a donkey, let alone a villa. Maybe because part of you believes that staying is noble, or foolish, or simply what people like you do when there's nowhere else to go. But you think about it. Every day, you walk past the caravans. You run your fingers through the sand of the gate and wonder how far your legs could carry you if you left everything behind. A man you barely know offers you space on a wagon. He has 2 goats, 3 children, and what he claims is a clean tent. We're heading east, he says, until the stars look kinder. You almost say yes. Instead, you buy dried figs and walk home. Some try to strike a balance, half leaving. They camp just outside the city, tents blooming in the desert like paper lanterns. They bring food from Cairo but sleep under stars. They visit the mosques by day, return to fire pits by night. The city looks smaller from out here, quieter, almost beautiful in the right light. But even in the desert, death finds them. The sickness doesn't stop at city gates. It hitches rides. It hides in bundles of cloth. It sits quietly on doorknobs and goatskin water bags. It waits. You hear of a small village 3 days' ride away, emptied in a week. Another, further north, where travelers were turned away at sword point. They built their own camp nearby. Now no one lives in either. You begin to dream of sand-swallowing buildings, of minarets tilting like sunflowers, of Cairo reduced to dunes and ghosts. But dreams lie. The city doesn't vanish. Not yet. It hollows. And those who remain begin to live like the desert themselves. Quiet, withered, windswept, You climb to the roof one morning and scan the horizon. There's a caravan on the move. A long, snaking line of silhouettes heading toward Giza. You squint, imagining their feet kicking up ancient dust, the cries of children muffled under headscarves, the clatter of pots swaying on ropes. They won't be the last. You wonder if they'll make it. You wonder if they'll remember you. And then you turn back toward the city, still breathing, still coughing, still waiting. And you close the door behind you. There's a madrassa near the old Fustat quarter that you used to pass every day. Its doors carved with delicate patterns of vines and stars, always slightly open, always humming with the sound of young voices. Now the doors swing wide with no one to close them, and the only sound that drifts out is wind against parchment. Cairo's schools have gone silent. It starts gradually, a few absences here and there, a teacher missing, then a student. The scholars blame fatigue, or travel, or exams, until the excuses stop coming. You walk past one of the smaller learning circles, once held under the shade of a fig tree, and find the bench overturned and the tree left to gossip with no audience. You think of all the knowledge stacked in those quiet rooms. Pages of astronomy, medicine, law, margins scribbled with jokes, arguments, diagrams of stars and spleens. Now the ink dries mid-thought. Questions hang unanswered. Wisdom waits for ears that won't return. You peek through one open archway and see a half-written verse on a blackboard. You don't dare erase it. You turn and leave, trying not to look like you're retreating from ghosts. Historians still marvel at how quickly Cairo's intellectual machine, once among the most advanced on Earth, ground to a halt. Al-Azhar University, jewel of learning, emptied room by room. Libraries were locked, not to protect the book from theft, but to stop the air from entering. Dust gathered faster than readers. The silence of the schools became its own kind of mourning. And it wasn't just students. The copyists stopped copying. The ink sellers stopped grinding. The papyrus merchants closed shop. You'd think they'd stay open. People love to write about disasters, right? But the disaster was already writing itself in bodies and absence. Even conversation changed. People who once debated whether the world was eternal now just debated who had coughed last. No one wanted to talk philosophy when they couldn't find saffron for their tea. The rhythm of intellectual life, the breath of Cairo, was growing shallow. You remember a boy who once cornered you to explain the workings of the astrolabe. He had a lisp and smelled like turmeric. You see him now, sitting quietly by the mosque gate, eyes red, book closed. You want to ask him what he's reading, but you know he isn't. No one is. Even poetry, Cairo's favorite pastime, grows hesitant. You used to hear verses recited in alleys and courtyards, men composing stanzas about bread prices or broken hearts or the way the moon looked over the canal. Now, those same poets mutter dark rhymes under their breath. They write laments, elegies, prayers disguised as meter. One man scrawls lines on the wall of his house every day before dawn. By the end of the week, there are 7 verses and no one left inside. In some places, the learning continues in whispers. A woman teaches her children by candlelight, writing with a charcoal nub on cracked tiles. A blind imam recites memoized text to the air, trusting that someone is still listening. You once pass a man speaking to pigeons as if they were students. Maybe they are, but the great schools, the halls of thought and echo, empty. And it's not just the loss of education. It's what comes with it. The tea vendors who serve the students, the scribes who filled margins with sarcasm, the scholars who roamed the streets in threadbare robes, quoting Aristotle one minute and yelling at donkeys the next. Gone, or going. Even the books feel quieter. You hold one, once, just to feel its weight again. It's Kitab al-Canon, the canon of medicine. Heavy, familiar, useless, maybe, but it smells like clarity. You flip to a chapter on fevers. You laugh when it says most are not fatal. You put the book back. It feels like lying. The absence becomes so profound that you begin to forget what noise felt like. The chatter of competing ideas, the clatter of pens, the thump of rolled scrolls. Now your days are quiet in ways that aren't peaceful. You try to remember a debate you overheard months ago. Two men arguing whether the stars rule fate or merely reflect it. At the time, it sounded like vanity. Now it sounds like prophecy. Maybe the stars knew. Or maybe they, too, are just watching. One day, you pass by the madrassa again. The fig tree has dropped its leaves early. A cat sleeps on the steps, bloated and unconcerned. The door is still open. This time, you step inside. The cushions are scattered. A cup of ink sits, half-dried, as if the student simply stood up mid-thought. The silence is deep, almost physical. You walk between the rows, your footsteps loud and wrong. You find a piece of parchment with a student's notes, lists of dates, words underlined, a joke scrawled in the margin. You pocket it, not out of theft, out of memory. The city's mind has gone quiet, and you, who once tried to listen to it, are left with its dreams half-finished. You walk back home, whispering lines from your favorite verse. No one hears you, except, maybe, the sky. You notice it first in the stillness of night. The street behind your house used to echo with life, dogs barking at passing carts, children giggling well past bedtime, someone always up too late singing or sweeping or chasing stray chickens. But now, it's too quiet. Not just fewer people quiet. Hollow. You don't realize what's changed until you sit up in the dark and think, where are the children? They are gone. Not all of them. Not all at once. But enough to make the silence unmistakable. You hear it in conversations, or what passes for them now. A woman muttering that her son's fever broke, just in time for him to stop breathing. A man talking to a doll as he sweeps out a room with only one blanket left. You try not to look too long into any empty courtyard. If you see a toy alone in the dust, you don't ask questions. Once, you passed a home where a child had drawn stars on the walls in chalk. Bright yellow burrs, messy but happy. Now those stars are half smudged, the door sealed shut, the chalk still in a small handprint on the floor. There's a heaviness to grief when it's small, not just child-sized. Deeper, unnatural, like something has stolen not just life, but possibility. You walk past homes where laughter used to tumble from windows like water. Now the shutters are closed, and even the pigeons seem quieter. One morning, you step into the alley and see small shoes lined up on a wall. 7 pairs, perfectly arranged. No note, no explanation, just shoes. You don't ask. Historians still struggle to document how many children Cairo lost. The records were never precise, and families rarely reported individual deaths. Some households buried 3, 4 children in as many days. Others simply vanished, the whole family gone. In some corners of the city, people began to assume that any home without a child's voice had been marked for death. But it's not just death that stings. It's how the city stops preparing for new life. Midwives vanish, either from illness or from lack of demand. Toy sellers stop opening their stalls. The sweets vendor near your mosque closes early every day now. No one buys dates dipped in honey for birthdays anymore. What's the point? You meet a neighbor outside, her arms cradling nothing. She rocks side to side like she's holding a baby, but her arms are empty. She doesn't seem to know. You offer her bread. She thanks you and tells you the baby is asleep. You nod, because what else can you do? Some parents cling harder. You see them pressing their children close, covering their mouths with scarves, whispering prayers into soft hair like spells. You pass one father walking in frantic circles with a girl no older than 4, mumbling blessings with each step, as if motion alone will keep her alive. And maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But he walks anyway. A friend tells you his heard of families sealing their children into separate rooms, feeding them through a crack in the door, touching them only with cloth. You think it sounds cruel. Then you see another friend's face when he says his daughter died in his arms. And suddenly, it doesn't sound so cruel anymore. You remember the nursery rhymes sung in the courtyards, the hand games, the rhyming riddles. Gone. No voices echo the counting songs. No footsteps skip along the stone paths. One night, you hum one under your breath, and it sounds obscene. Like a joke at a funeral. Even the animals seem confused. A dog sits outside a home and whines, tail still, staring at a door that hasn't opened in days. You try to feed him. He won't eat. Just keeps waiting. You realize something then. The children were the city's noise. Its wildness. Its movement. Without them, Cairo sounds old. Fragile. You begin to see toys left behind in strange places. A carved wooden horse on a windowsill. A rag doll tied to a cart. A little drum, half broken, sitting on the steps of a mosque. No one takes them. They are not items anymore. They are stories. Memorials. One day, you hear laughter again. Two boys, maybe 6 or 7, racing past you barefoot. You blink, wondering if you imagine them. But they are real, thin, fast, alive. You almost shout in surprise. Then you see the woman chasing after them, tears in her eyes, calling their names like she's afraid the sound might break them. You want to ask her how she kept them safe, how she didn't lose them, how she didn't go mad. But you don't. You let her pass. And that night, you dream of chalk stars and drumbeats and shoes too small to fill. You wake with this sudden urge to write every child's name you remember on your walls, just so they won't vanish again. But you only manage a few, because memory is heavy, and grief, when child-sized, is too large to carry. The city no longer ends at the cemetery. It is the cemetery. You can't pinpoint the exact day this truth sets in. Maybe it's the morning you walk through your neighborhood and count 4 funeral processions before breakfast. Or maybe it's when the gravedigger begins sleeping next to his shovel because he no longer has time to go home. At some point, Cairo stops burying its dead in the margins. Death moves to the center. It plants its flag and builds a district of its own. The cemeteries expand. Fast. You hear that families are buying burial space by the meter, if they can afford it. Those who can't, they improvise. Sand dunes become grave markers. Alleys become tombs. Empty courtyards fill with stones arranged in careful lines. Once, someone buried their mother in the center of a fountain. You don't know why. Maybe for the sound of water. Maybe because there was no way else. You walk past one of the oldest cemeteries and see new graves carved into places that were once reserved for saints and scholars. The bones of long-dead men now share soil with beggars, with children, with people no one remembered until they were wrapped in linen and lowered into the earth. Historians debate whether Cairo had enough space to bury its dead or whether entire families were lost to unmarked pits. Both are probably true. Official graveyards could not keep up. That much is certain. New burial grounds sprang up like mushrooms. Temporary, informal, necessary. One field behind the mosque became a forest of wooden markers in less than a week. Another square, once a playground, is now silent save for prayer murmurs and the soft crunch of feet walking through grief. Gravediggers, previously nameless, overlooked, become the city's most vital workers. They walk like ghosts themselves, covered in dust, ropes cutting into their shoulders. Some sing while they work, not out of joy, but rhythm. One gravedigger wears a necklace of garlic and never speaks. You hear he buried his entire family and never left the cemetery afterward. Another carves the name Layla into every marker, no matter who's inside. You wonder who Layla was. You never ask. The funerals change, too. They used to be processions. Drums, incense, wails at shattered windows. Now, they are quieter, quicker. One man leading two mourners. A woman clutching a book of prayers with both hands, fingers shaking like leaves. You once attend a burial where the body is lowered with no one speaking. The silence was louder than any sermon. There are no more grave sermons. Anyway, the imams are overwhelmed. The scholars are gone. The eulogies are whispered or written on scraps of cloth and tucked into the folds of the dead's garments. One man writes letters to his wife and buries them with strangers. He says they'll pass the message along. You don't laugh. You think it's beautiful. One day, you pass a funeral where the body is wrapped in a bright red shawl. Against the dust and dull linen of the other graves, it stands out like a rose on a battlefield. You stop and ask the mourner why red. It was all I had left, he says. That answer stays with you longer than it should. Burial teams move in groups now. Two dig. One recites. One guards. Sometimes they carry the body on a door, or a curtain, or a slab of broken marble. There's no time for ritual washing. No time for last words. Just the dirt. Just the stone. One night, you dream of a city made only of tombstones. Streets paved with prayer beads. The call to prayer echoing from grave to grave. When you wake, it takes you a few seconds to remember it was a dream, and then a few more to wonder if it wasn't. Even your vocabulary changes. Who died becomes less common than how many today. You no longer ask, were they old? Because the answer no longer matters. You learn to walk differently, to step around fresh mounds, to read grave markers with your eyes downcast, to avoid locking gazes with the living who look like they've already crossed halfway over. There's a saying people begin to use quietly. The dead are patient now. The living are in a hurry. You hear it one afternoon from a boy placing stones on a friend's grave. You don't know where he learned it, but it sounds old, like truth passed through teeth. Some cemeteries try to restore a sense of order. Men bring ink and wooden boards to keep track of names. It works for a while. Then the ink runs out. The boards splinter. Eventually, people stop writing. They mark graves with shoes, with scarves, with broken lanterns. One grave has a feather tucked into its corner, another a spoon. You begin to recognize patterns. This was a family grave, 4 markers, close together. That was someone alone, smaller, quieter, forgotten. This one is a child. You don't ask how you know. You just do. You bring dates one day. To eat. To leave. You're not sure. You place 3 on a grave and walk away without explanation. You don't need one. You begin to avoid looking at your own hands too long. Not out of illness, but because they've begun to learn the shape of grief too well. You can trace a grave with one palm now. Smooth the edges of soil. Tie a shroud. Close eyes. You are not a gravedigger, but Cairo is turning you into one. And you're not alone. The Nile doesn't stop. That might be the strangest part. While the rest of Cairo gasps, crumbles, and falls to its knees, the river just keeps going. Relentless. Indifferent. A slow-moving god that neither mourns nor celebrates, just moves. You watch it some mornings, standing on the same footbridge you've crossed since childhood. The banks are quieter now. No fishermen calling to one another. No children tossing stones. Just water, steady and unbothered, slipping past the chaos on either side like it never belonged to the city at all. The boats still come. Not as many, not as full, but they come. You see one glide downstream, piled with sacks of barley and a single ferryman hunched like a question mark. You wonder if he knows what Cairo has become, or if the river's silence keeps him safe from knowing. Sometimes, you imagine climbing aboard, lying down between the grain, and floating far from this place. Letting the current carry you past sorrow and smoke until you're a rumor somewhere else. Just a ghost in someone else's town. But you stay. Because the Nile isn't an escape. It's a mirror. It reflects what Cairo has become. A city drifting, carrying its dead and living side by side, pretending not to notice how blurred the line has become. You walk the banks and see small shrines built from driftwood and prayer beads. Offerings to keep the river kind. Coins tossed into eddies. Flowers you're not sure grew here. Someone, somewhere, is still hoping the water can forgive. Historians debate whether the Nile helped spread the plague or slowed it. Its waters fed Cairo, clothed it, carried it, but it also transported people, traders, pilgrims, wanderers. Fleas could travel in grain sacks. Sick men could lie still and float for days. The river was a blessing, and maybe a curse. You once believed the Nile would protect you. Now, you're not so sure. You hear stories. A boat found with no one alive aboard. Just candles still burning and a letter warning others to turn back. A floating funeral raft, wrapped in linen, drifting south until a fisherman spotted it days later, tangled in reeds. A girl who bathed in the river and fell ill within the week. Her family says the water was too warm, that it smelled wrong. Still, people come. They wash their hands at its edge. They whisper prayers. Some collect Nile water in jars to bless their homes. Others drink it without question, as if faith can filter infection. You start bringing your own water, boiled, salted, just in case. One afternoon, you watch an old man scatter ashes into the current. His hands shake. He says nothing. You say nothing. The river accepts everything without complaint. Later that week, you see 3 bodies pulled from a shallow bend, wrapped hastily in linen. No one claims them. A boy says they came from upriver. Another swears they floated from a village swallowed by illness. No one investigates. The guards don't even look up. There's no ceremony, just quiet, and the soft sound of water brushing against loss. You start to avoid the banks at dusk. Something about the way the light touches the river makes your skin itch. Like it's remembering for you. Like it's keeping score. And yet, you always return. Because the Nile is Cairo. Even in death. Especially in death. You see it in the porters still loading boats with sacks of flour, even though there's no one left to bake. In the ferrymen rowing empty crafts as if the routine itself could stave off collapse. In the children who come to skim stones across the surface and forget, for just a few minutes, what the world has become. And in the water itself, which does not judge, or pause, or even blink. You once heard a scholar say that the Nile was the city's memory, that every secret, every prayer, every scream, eventually drifted down its spine, that its waters carried the truth of Cairo far beyond the reach of any historian. You believe him now, because you've seen the river carry away sandals, scrolls, broken combs, shrouds, and names. So many names. You whisper some of them when you pass the banks. Names you remember. Names you overheard. Names you never got to say goodbye to. You whisper them like a roll call. You imagine the river folding them into its current and carrying them gently away. You imagine someone, somewhere far downstream, hearing your voice in the water and wondering what kind of city could lose so much and still exist. And you have no answer, just the rhythm of the water, endless, unmoved, and always moving. You stop keeping track of how many are gone. Not because you don't care, but because your memory can't hold it all anymore. Names blur. Faces fade. Whole neighborhoods disappear from your mental map like ink left out in the rain. And what's left behind? A city that breathes differently, that speaks in sighs and silence more than words. The survivors walk like sleepwalkers, They move as if gravity's doubled. Their eyes avoid yours. Or maybe it's you who avoids theirs. Because the hardest part, now, is not who's gone. It's who remains. You see them everywhere. The haunted. People who still exist. But only in the most technical sense. A woman sweeping her step 3 times a day, though no one passes anymore. A boy who lights incense outside a sealed door every morning and evening, even though no one lives inside. A bookseller who rearranges his shelf each day in alphabetical order, though no one buys. It's routine, repetition, ritual, the only things left that still make time feel real. You catch yourself doing it too, folding the same scarf, straightening the same tile, reciting the same prayer twice just to be sure. These tiny acts of control become your anchors in a sea of uncertainty. And the guilt? It's quieter now. Not gone. Just folded into the fabric of each day. You meet someone you thought had died. Their face is thinner. Their smile, smaller. They say they were out of the city. You nod and pretend to believe them. Maybe they are lying. Maybe they really were in the desert. Maybe they were buried alive in their own fear and just clawed their way back to daylight. Either way, they made it. You run into a friend you hadn't seen since before the silence began. He looks older. You both do. You exchange a few words, then fall into long pauses. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you know too much. There's a strange intimacy in survival. You see a couple walking hand in hand through the empty courtyard of what used to be a bathhouse. They are smiling, genuinely smiling. You don't know whether to feel joy or heartbreak, so you feel both. And there are new rituals now. People leave food out for strangers, sometimes out of kindness, sometimes because they can't bear to eat alone. You pass a door marked with an X and notice a loaf of bread on the step every morning. No one ever picks it up, but someone keeps leaving it. You start talking to birds. You find comfort in ants. You say hello to cats like they're neighbors. Because in a city where human contact feels radioactive, the animals remain unfazed. Even the dogs have grown patient. They don't beg anymore. They just follow you silently, stopping when you stop, staring when you stay. One night, you dream of a feast. Laughter, singing, all lamps lit in every window. You wake up with tears on your face and don't know if they're from joy or longing. The city isn't dead. It's changed. And you've learned to live in the after. You wash your clothes with the same care you'd once give to a guest. You sweep your doorstep. You water a plant you didn't plant. You begin writing again. Not big things, just names, observations, fragments of memory you refuse to let go. You keep living. Not because it's easy, or meaningful, or dramatic, but because life doesn't need a reason. Sometimes, you even laugh. A real, messy laugh when you burn your flatbread or stub your toe or hear someone cursing the pigeons. It's ridiculous. It's human. It feels like coming back to yourself. Historians argue over how much of Cairo's soul survived the Black Death. Did its culture endure? Its spirit? Or did the plague break something that would never fully mend? But you know something they don't. You know that survival is messy. It isn't triumphant. It's slow, heavy, full of contradictions. It's eating a fig and remembering a funeral. It's smiling at a wedding while still grieving your brother. You're a patchwork now. A stitched-together version of someone who once believed cities couldn't bleed. But you're here, and that counts for something. The sun still rises, the pigeons still coo, and the city, strange and hollow and changed, still opens its doors to the living, even if only a few are left to knock. The scent of death no longer surprises you. What surprises you now is life. A fresh loaf of bread still warm at the center. A child's laugh that doesn't end in a cough. The accidental beauty of a neighbor's laundry flapping like banners above an alley that seemed too much. These moments bloom like weeds in ruins. Unexpected, a little defiant, impossible not to notice. You walk past a house where, weeks ago, you watched a buddy carrot out. Today, someone is planting herbs in the courtyard. Mint, basil. You pause, pretending to adjust your scarf, just to inhale. A woman waves from her balcony with a hand still wrapped in mourning cloth. You wave back. You don't speak. There's a sacred quiet between those who made it through. And yet, the city speaks again. Not loudly, not like before, but you hear it. A drumbeat, hesitant but real. The shuffle of feet returning to markets. The sharp voice of a vendor who's apparently decided that surviving a plague gives him the right to raise his prices. Honestly, he's probably right. You see someone repainting a wall. Bright blue. Sloppy. Beautiful. It makes no sense. It's not functional. Not necessary. But it's color, and you love him for it. Even the mosques feel different. Still not full, but fuller. The imam speaks slower now. Like every word is a treasure unburied. You notice fewer sermons about punishment, more about patience. The old metaphors, light, water, seeds, they feel less like flourishes and more like truths. You're not sure if people believe more now, or less, but they believe differently. You've started writing again. Not letters, not prayers, just observations. A man whistling while sweeping. A scarf tied like a bandage. A baby who sneezes and laughs. You record them like artifacts, as if someone in the future might want proof that Cairo found its way back. Historians might someday call this a recovery. That's not quite right. It's not that things went back to normal. They didn't. It's that the city, like you, has grown around the wound. You hear about marriages happening again. Quiet ones. 2 guests. A borrowed robe. A single bowl of dates. But love insists on being heard, even if whispered. You help a neighbor move furniture. She says it's time to open the back room again. You don't ask what happened there. She doesn't say. But the act is loud with meaning. Someone paints a mural on a ruined wall. 3 birds flying toward a crescent moon. No signature. No explanation. People start leaving flowers at its base. You leave one too. Not because you believe in symbols, but because you believe in trying. You pass a small classroom with 3 students and 1 teacher. The blackboard reads, "What did the city remember?" You stop at the window for a moment. The children's voices don't sound like ghosts. They sound like roots pushing through stone. You think of everyone who didn't make it. You speak their names silently when no one's listening. You don't do it for comfort. You do it because it feels like keeping a promise. Some streets never reopen. Some doors never unseal. There are parts of Cairo that will always belong to the dead, but the living carve their paths beside them. Not over, not through. Beside, the river still flows. The cats still watch you like they know the secret to all of this and aren't impressed. And you, against all odds, are still here. You don't feel brave. You don't feel lucky. You feel after. And that's enough. You sleep more now. Dream less. But when you do dream, it's often of the old city. Not the one before the plague, but the one that tried to grow back in its shadow. The one with chipped paint and red shawls and fig trees that won't die. You begin to understand. Disaster doesn't end. It echoes. And healing is not a return. It's an evolution. Cairo is no longer golden, but it's alive. And so are you. The streets are quiet now. You lie back on your mat, the air warm against your skin, and listen to the soft hum of a city finally exhaling. Cairo sleeps, not the sleep of ignorance, but the deep, earned sleep of survival. Somewhere, a prayer drifts lazily through the air. A cat pads across a rooftop. A lantern flickers in a window where a child once cried and now dreams again. The river murmurs its endless song, carrying memories downstream. And you rest your hands against your chest, the rise and fall steady, patient. You made it through. Through silence, through fever, through days where time felt like ash and the night pressed against your ribs. You're still hay, not untouched, but not undone. And when the wind carries the scent of mint or ink or roasted dates, you smile, not because it's over, but because you remember what it cost to arrive at this moment. The city lives. You live. And tomorrow, quietly, gently, without fanfare, life will go on. Sleep well, dream deeply, and let history keep watch tonight.